So I'm going to read this story from the Swami Purana about Shivaratri because that's who we're studying is all about the sacred ash, which is sacred to Lord Shiva. And I found this to be an interesting story. A little nasty in part, but that's all right. We'll overlook that. The name of the story is Tarak Asura and the celebration of Shivaratri. So it talks about how Shivaratri started. And here I've been doing this Shivaratri since 1982, and I never knew the story. So I thought it would be interesting to read. So Shiva was quite naked. He used to wear ashes, and especially since he lost his loving wife and housekeeper, he really had nothing else clean to wear. He was wandering around in this naked and intoxicated state, meditating upon the presence of the goddess, when one day he came to a Brahmin village. He walked up to the well of that village, where a number of young maidens of that village were drawing water, and requested, "Give me some water to drink. I'm thirsty." The ladies looked at that naked fakir and screamed, and they went running into the village. When the Brahmins came out to see what the commotion was about, they found Shiva standing by the well, stark naked. They got very angry and said, "Shiva, you have no shame. You have no sense at all. Our young girls have been raised in the highest standards of purity and modesty, and here you are with no shame walking stark naked into our village. What nonsense is this? We curse you, Shiva. Let your lingam fall off." Shiva didn't say anything, but instantly his lingam fell down. And when that happened, simultaneously, all the passion was drained from the whole universe. All the animals stopped procreating, and all the plants stopped producing. Even the earth stopped rotating, and the sun stopped moving in its course. There was no attraction to conduct any of the laws of gravity, and all the laws of motion became useless. The god said, "What's happening on earth? Nobody seems to be making a sacrifice. We haven't had our food today. Nobody is feeding us. Do you know what happens when the gods are not fed? They don't send the rain. If it doesn't rain, nothing grows on the earth. The men get weak, the gods get weak, and creation can desist from existence. Who shall we call for help?" So this is a good thing for you to tell your people you're going to be training in the fire ceremony, that this is one of the reasons we're doing that. Well, about that, this time there was an asura named Tarakasura. Tarak means illuminator, and asura means duality. Tarakasura is the illuminator of duality. He did a severe tapasya, a great penance. Then Brahma came to him and said, "What boon do you want? Choose from me some boon, and I will grant you your desire." Tarakasura said, "I want to be immortal. I wish that I will never die." Brahma said, "That's impossible. Everything born must die at some time or other. Choose another boon." Tarakasura thought for a moment and then said, "If I have to die, then I want my death to occur only at the hands of the son of Shiva." Oh, joy, he thought. Shiva doesn't have a lingam, and even if he does get one, he doesn't have a wife. It will certainly be a long, long time before Shiva gets a son. Brahma said, Tatastu, I give you that boon. Then Tarakasura, the illuminator of duality, conquered the entire earth and made everyone on earth servants of the illuminator of duality. He then marched straight up to the heavens and sat down on the throne of Indra. He threw all the gods and goddesses out of heaven and became lord of the three worlds. I want everyone to serve the illuminator of duality. No one will worship the gods. Don't waste time meditating. Just serve me. I will be the only one worshipped in the three worlds, he ordered. At this news, the gods were extremely depressed. And in that dejected state, they asked one another, what are we going to do about this? Shiva doesn't have a lingam. Mother doesn't have a body. We need the son of Shiva in order to get rid of this wicked Asura. Indra remembered the curse of Abhrigu Muni. People will even question the necessity of making offerings to Indra, and in many lands you will be forgotten entirely. All of this is overwhelming. How are we going to combat such a state of affairs? Well, the first things we have to do is to make Shiva capable of having a son. Let us ask him to put his lingam back on, said the gods. Brahma and the other gods, along with all the Brahmins, went to where Shiva was sitting and said, Shiva, please put on your lingam. Shiva said, it wasn't my idea to take it off. In fact, it was the curse of these holy Brahmins that brought this about. Therefore, I'm not going to put the lingam back on until every one of you worships that lingam with milk and ghee and honey. And bowing down with the greatest of respect, beg blessings of that lingam. All night you will sit up and chant songs of worship and devotion to that lingam. After celebrating the Shiva Ratri, then I will put it on. But remember your promise to observe the vow of Shivaratri every year. Then all the gods and Brahmins celebrated the Shivaratri in a very meticulous detail. Shiva was pleased and he put on his lingam, blessing all creation with the capacity to procreate again. So that's what I didn't know. So then, like I said, I didn't realize that was the origin of Shivaratri. Uh, then the next story is the Divine Mother promises to take birth. So that's the other aspect. So because earlier on, Shiva married Sati, and her father was disrespectful to Shiva and didn't invite him to a big yagya, and so she burnt herself up. And so Shiva has not had a wife for quite some time, and he's not very excited about trying it again after this horrible thing that happened to his beloved. So this next story is the Divine Mother promises to take birth. Then the gods and Brahmins, the rishis and munis, all went to the Himalayas. There they began to perform various forms of tapasya in order to request the Divine Mother to make her presence manifest. They recited hymns to the goddess and sang the stories of her manifestations. They performed fire sacrifices and yoga asanas, pranayam, mudras, and kriyas, japas, and tapa, and in every way they knew they invoked the Divine Mother. They begged her to please make her presence manifest. When they lost themselves in the ecstasy of devotion, the Divine Mother came and spoke to them. She said, in what way can your desires be fulfilled? Tarakasura, the illuminator of duality, has won the boon that only the son of Shiva can destroy him. With the strength of this boon, he has been creating evil on earth. Therefore, we request you to come and manifest yourself as an embodied form. Please, Mother, marry Lord Shiva again and give us the son that will lead the armies of divinity to victory in battle. Mother said, I accept your proposal. If Shiva will have me, I will try to fulfill your wish. I will take birth in the home of Himalaya, and I shall perform tapasya in order to secure Shiva's forgiveness. If I become gracious and If he becomes gracious and so desires, I will marry Lord Shiva again. And when Shiva will accept me as his wife, we will bring forth the son that will lead the armies of divinity to victory. Hearing this news, Himalaya began to cry. Mother, what have I done to deserve the honor of having you take birth in my home? How should I act when I become the father of the Divine Mother? What kind of home should I maintain when the Divine Mother takes birth? What kind of tapasya should I perform? What should be my way of life? How should I speak? How should I act? How should I regard you? How should I serve you? How can I love you purely so that your mission can be fulfilled? Please explain this to me. The discussion of these questions of the Himalayas constitute the teachings of the Devi in the Devi Gita. So now she's being born, and this is called the birth of Parvati. After the Divine Mother gave her promise to the gods that she would take her birth in the house of the Himalayas, Himalaya went back to his home and waited for her arrival with great anticipation. Finally, Sati was reborn in the house of Himalaya. As she was the daughter of the great mountain Parvat, she was called Parvati. Parvati took birth in the house of Himalaya, and there were great rejoicing. Himalaya performed the beautiful pujas of worship and gave tremendous dakshina as gifts to the Brahmins, to the poor, and to the homeless. From her very childhood, the first word out of the Divine Mother's mouth was Shiva. As she grew up, she loved making Shiva lingams, performing their pujas, and in many ways she increased her devotion for Shiva. She learned all his mantras and all his songs, and in every way how to perpetuate the Lord. Parvati grew up to be a very devoted lady. She became master of this of all the 64 arts that any young lady worthy of marrying the Lord should possess. The following is a list of the arts that she mastered: singing, playing musical instruments, dancing, union of dancing, singing, and playing musical instruments, writing and drawing, tattooing. I think that means probably doing the uh, what do they do on the hands? I get henna, doing the henna on the hands. Um, uh, Adorning an idol with rice and flowers, making flower arrangements on bed, couches, or upon the ground, staining, dyeing, coloring, or otherwise painting hair, nails, bodies, or teeth, fixing stained glass or gems into the door, the art of making beds or spreading cushions or carpets for reclining, making vessels of water to sound musical notes, storing water in vessels or cisterns, making pictures, trimming and decorating, stringing of rosaries, necklaces, garlands, and the wreaths. Oh, Milby, you already have that skill. Uh, oh my gosh, this goes quite on. Oh well, we'll read them all. Um, Binding the hair with turbans, top knots, or crests of flowers, scene making or stage representations, making ear ornaments, preparing perfumes, proper placement of ornaments, jewels, gems, and adornment in dress, magic or sorcery, quickness or dexterity and manual skills, cooking, preparing lemonade, sherbets, and various drinks with flavors and colors, sewing and tailoring, making flowers, animal birds from yarn or thread, solving riddles, enigmas, covert speeches, verbal puzzles. A game, also something called Prehaliki, which is a game consists of repeating verses as one person finishes, another person has to commence at once. Making figures and images in play, study of sentences difficult to pronounce, like a limerick or tongue twister, reading from books, including chanting and intoning, the art of mime and dance, to complete the stanzas of poems composed by others, the art of making coarse and common things to appear as fine and good as excellent silk, knowledge of spinning or spindlework, carpentry and building crafts or trades, also the knowledge of cutting things, architecture or the art of building, knowledge about gold and silver, jewels and gems, chemistry and mineralogy, knowledge of the qualities of gems, knowledge of praise, knowledge of gardening, cockfighting, quail fighting, and ram fighting, to speak the languages of the parrots. It's interesting you're learning that one. The art of speaking by changing the forms of words, dressing, braiding the hair with perfumes, understanding writing in cipher or code, the capacity to understand foreign languages, speaking in the dialects of a region, various flower arrangements, preparing yantras or mystical diagrams, mental exercises such as completing stanzas or verses upon receiving part of them, the knowledge inspiring wealth and welfare or success and accomplishment, composing poems, knowledge of the rules of society and how to pay respects and compliments to others, knowledge of the art of war, knowledge of using various vocabulary and rhythms in verse or speech, the art of disguising individuals, various ways of gambling, the capacity to draw or attract to one's own self, skill in youthful sports, knowledge of history, knowledge of good moral conduct, knowledge with which confers or foretells victory. So Parvati became master of all these skills. From her youth, she had decided to perform tapasya, strong spiritual discipline, to attain Shiva as her husband. She went to her mother, whose name was Menaki, and said, "Mother, I'm going for the performance of tapasya. I am determined to have Shiva as my husband. Would you bless me?" Menaka replied, "I'm not so sure about your choice, but I bless your tapasya." Wearing only one cloth, Parvati went off to sit on a glacier where she chanted Om Namah Shivaya. She submerged herself into freezing cold water that ran off from the melting glacier and chanted Om Namah Shivaya. She fasted on water, fasted on air, fasted without even taking air, and in many ways she deprived herself as a sacrifice to show her love for Lord Shiva. All the gods were extremely anxious because of their desire for the son that would come from Lord Shiva to slay the wicked Tarakasura, the illuminator of duality. The gods convened together and said, "Let's find a way to help Parvati. Let's help her in her objective of marrying Lord Shiva." In the assembly of gods, it was decided that Kama, Deva, who is the god of love, would take his flowered arrows and shoot them at Lord Shiva. They said, "Be accurate. Make sure Lord Shiva falls in love with Parvati and quickly accepts her as his wife." Kamadeva said, "Certainly, this is going to be the end of me. I should shoot an arrow at Lord Shiva. Let me shoot at anyone else. I'll be more than willing. But Lord Shiva, he is master of all the passions. He has received the boon from Lord Vishnu that only he will be free from Mohini, which is Maya. How can I inflame Shiva with the passion of love? The god said, you must try. This is the only salvation for the gods. We must give Parvati every available assistance. Now go, take your wife Rati the springtime, along with you, all your accomplices, everyone who will aid and abet you in performing the art of love. Take them all and go shoot your arrows at Shiva. Receiving the order from the assembly of gods, the god of love marched off in the performance of his appointed task. He saw Shiva deeply absorbed in perfect meditation, and the god of love prayed for success in his task. All the gods and goddesses of heaven stood behind the trees, watching the scene from afar. Rati allowed the spring to begin, and birds began to chirp, and bees began to buzz. The air was scented with the fragrance of the fresh flowers, and the stage was set for love. The god of love drew his bow and he let loose his arrow. Whoosh! The arrow struck Lord Shiva. Shiva was awakened from his meditation. He looked at the arrow that struck him and said, what is this? An arrow with a flower at the end? Do you think I am going to fall victim to the god of love? Does he think he's going to make me a slave to passion? Shiva got angry. From his third eye came a light, a radiant light of fire, and he beamed it right at Kamadeva, the god of love, who was immediately burnt to ashes. All the gods exclaimed, oh no, what have we done? Shiva, now you have burnt love to ashes. How will there be any love in this universe? All the gods exclaimed, oh no, what have we done? Was was this your idea, gods? Shiva asked, did you think that I, Lord Shiva, would fall prey to the flowered arrows of the god of love? Shiva inquired. Impossible. That was a very ill-conceived plan. But Shiva answered the gods, still, Sati, your wife, has taken birth as Parvati, the daughter of the mountains. She is doing tapasya to marry with you again and have you for her husband. You see, the wicked Tarsura, the illuminator of darkness, the illuminator of duality, has thrown all the gods out of heaven. He became strong with the boon that Brahma gave him, that only the son of Shiva will be able to defeat him. You see, Shiva, we're dependent on you. We need you to marry Parvati and give us the son that will remove our difficulties. Shiva replied, I am always ready and willing to help the gods in any noble purpose. If I marry, I must. If I marry, I must. Marry, I shall, but not because of passion inspired but by the arrows of the god of love. I will marry for the noble purpose of protecting Dharma and not because the god of love has shot an arrow at me to try to infect me with passion. If indeed Parvati is Sati, then most certainly I will agree to marry her. Rati the spring, the wife of the god of love, went to Shiva crying in desperation, Shiva, today you have made me a widow. How shall I enjoy my life without my husband? How shall I pass my life as a widow? Is there any sadness greater than being bereft of my beloved husband? Shiva said, I give you a boon. Your husband will live eternally, and he will be the strongest and most dynamic of all the gods, but he will remain invisible. Even still, he will touch the hearts of every living being. Receiving Shiva's boon, Rati was pleased. She said, Shiva, when will I ever be able to see my husband again? Shiva replied, spring, your husband will incarnate as the son of Arjuna and Subhadra, the sister of Krishna. His name will be known as Abhimanyu. At that time, you will take birth in the house of Macha Naras, the king of Cheti, and your name will be Uttara. Uttara and Abhimanyu will again embrace, just as love and spring do now. Rati was very happy with this boon, and in that happiness she praised Lord Shiva. The gods were pleased to have received Lord Shiva's assent. They immediately sent messengers to to Himalayas. Himalaya, we bring you glad tidings. Lord Shiva has consented to marry Parvati. Himalaya too was very pleased, but Menaki, his wife, was sorely distressed. She said, Himalaya, Lord Shiva sits on top of the mountain naked. He is not a fitting groom for our Parvati. Himalaya replied, excuse me, Menaka, you do not know who Lord Shiva is. Parvati has been doing tapasya just for this purpose, to get Lord Shiva as her husband. The gods themselves want Shiva to be her husband. Please accept it. All right, Menaka replied. Allow the wedding to proceed. Lord Shiva disguised himself as a native village hunter, and went to where Parvati was performing her tapasya. He said, Oh, young lady, what tapasya are you performing? Parvati replied, I want to marry Lord Shiva. The village hunter laughed. Ha ha, Lord Shiva. Do you mean that naked sadhu who lives on top of the mountain alone and by himself, who sits the whole day in meditation, who associates with ghosts and goblins, and who always remains intoxicated? You want to marry that, Lord Shiva? Yes, that Lord Shiva, the Lord of the three worlds. Oh no, a young lady like you, who is so beautiful and well skilled in all 64 arts, deserves a finer husband than that. Who would be a finer husband than Lord Shiva? Me, replied the village huntsman. Huh? Said Parvati. You go away from here right now. Leave me alone. I will have no one other than Lord Shiva for my husband. I won't listen to your insolent insults. I will have no one but Lord Shiva. When Shiva heard these words, he assumed his own form and said, So be it, I accept. So then they got married and eventually had a son. So
Wow.
that's the story of Shivaratri and the marriage of Parvati and Lord Shiva. Eventually they had Kartikeya or Skanda, and he was the one that, I know Ganesh is also their son, but really he's the more the son of Parvati, because she created him to guard her door, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And then Shiva got upset and cut off his head, and that's why he has an elephant head. But then they had another son, and that's Kartikeya, also known as Skanda, which is the leader of the heavenly armies, and he was the one who killed Taraksura.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile,
Wow.
the gods had to wait quite a long for all this, which I think is often a lesson for me, you know. I say my prayers and I expect fruition within 24 hours. The guys
Yeah,
have to wait years and years and years and years. Who knows how long all this took?
that's a great story.
Yeah. Did you get this book?
I do have it. Yeah.
It's a
Other
really
two.
lovely one, and you can sort of pick and choose. And there's also a nice glossary that talks, it's got all the names. So, if you're looking for something about Rama, there's something in there about Rama or something like that. So it's a nice cross section.
So what's the Devi Gita?
The Devi Gita. It's all about the goddess. So we've got the Bhagavad Gita and the Devi Gita. I've never read it.
Okay.
But you get it and read it, Nilby.
Okay, that could be our next book.
Okay, well maybe that's a good idea. And it's I think he has a copy. He wrote a copy, and I really like Swami.
Oh,
What's his name? Swami Satyananda Saraswati. He really, rather than just giving the name Taraksura, he talks about it as, the illuminator of duality or darkness. So
Right.
he explains a lot of times the names. Anyways, any other questions? Okay. Well, we'll keep on with our readings.